All right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you all can hear me and you can see the PowerPoint up on the screen. We will go ahead and get started since it is 10 o'clock. Thank you all so much for joining us for our kickoff to the FY25 21st Century Grant Competition. My name is Bryn Obermiller, and I am the Senior Director of ESEA Oversight and currently overseeing the Extended Learning Program here at the department. And I am joined by our amazing team, Mario Pennington, Artina Fawcett, as well as Emily McCutcheon from the University of Tennessee Social Work Office of Research and Public Service, which we lovingly refer to as SWORP. And you will be hearing from all of these folks throughout our time together. Here at the department, we always like to ground our work in the state's strategic plan, Best for All, which establishes priorities in 3 areas: academics, student readiness, and educators. All of our extended learning programs are built around the strategic plan with a particular emphasis placed on the areas of academics and student readiness. So we do have a ton of information to cover today in what I thought was a long time, but now that we're going through everything, I feel like it's a very short time. So we will dive right in with a program overview, and then we will go into exactly how the application and review process will work. We will go over all of the components included in the application. We will briefly touch on how charter school applicants will handle this process. We'll cover a lot of e-plan instructions, and then we'll finish off with next steps and resources. So speaking of resources, before we get too deep into all of this, I do want to point out a very important resource, and that is our FY25 21st Century RFA, or our Request for Applications document. So this document is going to cover everything that we discussed today and more. It will include all of the application and review timelines, all of the application and program requirements, detailed application and budget instructions, copies of needed related documents, and a copy of the rubric that will be used to score the applications. So as soon as the application goes live in ePlan on or around February 1st, this will be posted in TDOE resources and will also be posted on the Extended Learning webpage. We will email this out to our contacts as well, and then it will actually be posted as a resource within the actual application in ePlan, and we'll show you what that looks like a little bit later in the presentation. So all of the links that you see in this PowerPoint will lead you to the places that these documents will be posted once they are available. So if you went to these links today, you would see a placeholder, but once that document is posted, then the links in this PowerPoint will get you there. And so we strongly recommend that you read through the entire RFA before you begin your application, and that you refer to it often as you complete your application. There is no way that we can cover everything in this webinar today that is in that RFA. So again, it is very important, a really important resource that will help you plan out and submit a really strong application. And then this slide just shows you a screenshot of where the RFA will be posted in TDOE resources. And then also right below the RFA is where we will post a copy of these slides once the webinar has concluded. And with that, we will go ahead and dive into our program overview. And so we're going to start at the very beginning. The 21st Century Program is authorized under ESSA under Title IV Part B, and the program provides federal funding to establish or expand community learning centers. ESSA does establish that these centers should provide students with opportunities for academic enrichment, youth development, and family support during non-school hours or during periods when school is not in session. The U.S. Department of Education provides funding for this program, which is then allocated to us here at the department. And then we serve as the pass-through entity for these funds and take over the responsibility of awarding and overseeing the grant. This is a table showing categories of approved activities for the grant. This list is based on GEPRA measures for the program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But these would be the categories of activities that you would be reporting on annually through 21 APR. These are pretty broad categories, but when you are thinking about activities for your grant, this is kind of where you want to start. And then you want to obviously take the needs and the interests of your students and plan activities that fall under these categories. And then there at the bottom of this slide, we have a link to the 21st Century Non-Regulatory Guidance, which contains some more information about the allowable use of funds. Next, we'll talk about who is eligible to apply for the grant. Under ESSA, school districts, community-based and faith-based organizations, and other public or private organizations serving students in Tennessee are eligible for funding. If you are new to working with the state, maybe you've never had a grant with the state before, you will be required to verify your ability to administer complex grant programs before we consider funding your project. And then down at the bottom, you can see that grants will not be awarded to fund startup organizations or programs. So your organization will need to be already established in order to be eligible. Also specified under ESSA, grants are only able to be awarded to programs that primarily serve students who attend schools with a high concentration of low-income students. Okay, and that high concentration is defined as 40% or higher. So any school that has that poverty factor of 40% or higher is going to be eligible for designation as a Title I school-wide program. And those are the schools that we are looking to target with this grant. As part of the application process, you will need to provide the data that you are using to determine that eligibility. So most applicants are using free and reduced lunch percentages or similar data. CBOs who are applying for this grant will need to work with their partnering schools and school districts to gather this data. And then at the bottom, you can see that LEAs in general, you should be using the same data that you use to determine eligibility for your Title I Part A program. If you have any questions about the data you need to be using, please feel free to reach out. ESSA also dictates that priority be given to applicants who serve students that attend schools that are implementing comprehensive or targeted support and improvement programs under Section 1116, and that are submitted jointly between at least one district receiving funds under Title I and at least one public or private community organization. So in Tennessee, this is going to apply to districts that have either a CSI, TSI, or ATSI school. And we'll talk a little bit more about this and a couple of other competitive priorities as we move through the presentation. So next, we'll shift just a little bit and talk about program hours. Any awarded program must meet the service hour requirements that you see up on the screen. So programs serving students in grades kindergarten through 6 must be open a minimum of 12 hours a week. So over the program year, we are looking for participation rates of 90 to 180 hours. And programs serving students in grades 7 through 12 must be open a minimum of 10 hours per week with target participation at least 45 to 90 hours per program year. So you definitely want to keep these targets in mind as you are building your program and make sure you are meeting those targets when you are completing your application. Under ESSA, there is an option for applicants to use funds to provide expanded learning time, or ELT for short. So under this option, grantees would provide all of the students at a school with an additional 300 program hours, either before, during, or after the traditional school day. And so this is different than running your, normal extended learning program. You want to think of this as more of an expanded school day program. So under this option, you would either extend the school day, the school week, or even the school year for everyone in the school. So if this is something that you would like to propose, you would need to upload a detailed plan in the related document section of the application. And if this is something you would like to learn more about, there is a link to a very informative Q&A on this slide that should be able to give you some good information. A couple of other requirements. All programs must provide services in a manner consistent with the state child care guidelines. And there we have a link to the state law that outlines those guidelines. Any program that operates for 15 or more hours per week must work with the department's early learning division to receive a certificate of approval for operations. And then all awarded programs must be fully operational and serving students by October 1st in year one. So in general, and then in subsequent years of the grant, we typically ask that grantees get those programs up and running earlier than that, probably closer to early or mid-September. We do, however, understand that things take a while to get started in a new program in year one, especially if you are a new grantee. So that is why you see that October 1 deadline. But in general, we do recommend that you all get your program started as early as possible in the year, just so you have access to enough students, right? You don't want parents to get their routine set. And then when you open your program and offer services, they already have plans for that time. So definitely want to make sure people are getting their programs started as early as possible. Another requirement that applies to all awardees is that you must maintain technology professional liability / cyber liability insurance of $1 million, as well as crime insurance of $1 million. These insurance requirements are in addition to commercial general liability insurance, workers' compensation and employee liability insurance, automobile liability insurance, and sexual abuse and molestation insurance. Okay, so we're going to shift just a little bit and talk about equitable services for non-public schools. So under ESSA, grantees must provide educational services and other benefits to eligible non-public school children that are equitable in comparison to the services and benefits provided to public school children. And so this would all occur, of course, after timely and meaningful consultation with those eligible non-public schools. So this is a requirement of anyone receiving the award. So it would include both our school districts as well as any community-based or faith-based organizations. If you are not sure if you have eligible non-public schools in your surrounding area, there is a current list of Tennessee non-public schools available at the link that you see up on the screen. I would definitely check on this list before you begin completing your application to see if you do have any non-public schools that you would need to consult with. And so I do want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the requirements of consultation under ESSA. And ESSA is very clear that consultation must occur before the fiscal agent makes any decision that affects the opportunities of eligible non-public school students to participate in the program. Therefore, consultation with eligible non-public schools must occur during the design and development of the initial grant application. So in other words, you are required to work with your eligible non-public schools as you design that application and include plans for any participating non-public schools within that application. If you are awarded funds, you will also be required to consult with any participating non-public schools during the provision of equitable services and during the annual non-public school equitable service consultation process as defined by the department. So Consultation is something that you hear over and over and over in ESSA when it comes to non-public schools, and it is a very important piece of this work because it really does establish positive and productive working relationships, and that is really what you're aiming for with your non-public schools. So ESSA specifies that consultation must be timely and meaningful, and here we have some definitions about what that means. So meaningful means that the non-public schools were provided with a genuine opportunity to express their views and have their views seriously considered. And then timely is defined as providing adequate notice to non-public school officials. And so if you are simply offering services to a non-public school without opportunities for true, timely, and meaningful consultation, you are not meeting the requirements of ESSA. And so on this slide, we go into even more detail about what is required for consultation under 21st century. Required topics include what you see up on the screen. So how the subgrantee will identify the needs of eligible private school students, what services the subgrantee will offer to eligible private school children, their teachers, and parents, how, where, and by whom the subgrantee will provide services to eligible private school children, how the subgrantee will assess academically the services provided, and how the grantee will use the results of that assessment to improve services, the size and scope of the equitable services that the subgrantee will provide to eligible children and other educational personnel, the amount of funds available for those services and how that amount is determined, how and when the agency will make decisions about the delivery of services to such children, including a thorough consideration and analysis of the views of the private school officials on the provision of services, whether the agency shall provide services directly or through a separate government agency, consortium, or entity, or through a third-party contractor, and how to address in writing when school district or community-based organizations and a private school disagree with contract decisions or other services. So these, again, are all of the things that you must discuss with those eligible non-public schools in consultation. And we do have all of this included on our consultation form, which we'll talk about a little bit more in just a few minutes. And so it is required that grantees, if you are awarded, that you maintain documentation of that initial as well as your ongoing consultation. If you ever get monitored or if a non-public school ever files a complaint against your organization, it is very important that you maintain all of that documentation to show that you met all of those requirements of consultation. So like I just said, we do have an initial consultation or kind of an intent form included in the RFA. Applicants that have any eligible non-public schools will be required to upload that form to the application. That is going to include CBOs as well as school districts. And then I have also linked a sample affirmation form as well as a sample agreement form. So these are forms that we use for all of our ESSA programs. We do have plans to develop forms specific to 21st century, as it is a little bit of a different program than the rest of our ESSA programs. And so be on the lookout for those if you are awarded funds. Okay. So moving on from equitable services, we are going to talk about our principles of effectiveness. So under ESSA, programs must be operated in a manner that follows the principles of effectiveness that you see up on the screen. So this includes that programs must be based on an assessment of objective data regarding the need for before and after school programming in the proposed schools and communities. And so we do have a section of the application devoted to this where you will discuss the assessment that you conducted as part of this grant. Number two, programs must be based on an established set of performance measures aimed at ensuring the availability of high quality academic enrichment opportunities. And we'll talk more about those performance measures and how you all will use those over the next slides. And then, if appropriate, be based on scientifically based research that provides evidence that the program or activity will help students meet the state and local student academic achievement standards. Okay, so those are the principles of effectiveness. And that leads us really nicely over to our next section where I'm going to have Emily come off mute, and she's going to cover the next couple of slides about federal performance measure reporting, state performance targets, and local evaluation requirements. Emily, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can. You just let me know when you want me to proceed with the slides.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Yes, the 21st century grant recipients must collect and report outcome data for performance measures that have been established at the federal level. And then there are some state performance targets that tie into those, and there are also local evaluation requirements. Those all build on each other, so they're not separate, but they do have some different components to them that I'll explain as we go through. But you will be asked to collect and report on outcome data, submit an annual performance report for the 21st century developed by the U.S. Department of Education, and then participate in a rigorous evaluation process that will include, again, the collection of attendance, academic achievement, and disciplinary information for the students served. Okay, next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please?
Sorry, I'm stuck. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Freezing. Okay, did we make it?
Yes.
Okay,
thank you.
there we go. Perfect.
Oh, yeah. So we'll start with the federal performance measures that were set. There are 5 of them. The first 2 deal with academic achievement, 2 different areas of academic achievement. The first is state assessments, looking at the percentage of students in grades 4 through 8 participating in the programs who experience growth in reading, language arts, or and on math state assessments. And then the second looks at student GPA, but only those students in 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades attending the programs. And we're looking for improvement for both of those. As you can see here, certain measures apply only to certain students in certain grades. This by no means means that applicants are required to serve students in all grade levels. This is a year-to-year comparison for all of these 5 that I'm going to talk about. So when you accept the grant, you agree to that when you enroll students, you will collect data from the previous school year to serve as a baseline for this comparison. Next slide, please. We will also, the federal data also looks at school day attendance, and that is the percentage of students in grades 1 through 12 who previously were chronically absent, meaning they missed 10% or more of these school days, usually around 18 or more school days. And we are looking to see if they have improved in their attendance during the year they are in the program. We also look at student behavior, and this is based on in-school suspensions. Any student who experienced any in-school suspensions, we are looking for a decrease year to year. Don't worry, we understand that not every district or school uses in-school suspension as a discipline tool, and that can be accounted for in the reporting. Engagement in learning is based on teacher-reported student behaviors. In the spring, UT SWRPS will send out a survey to participants, teachers, and ask, among other things, if they feel that participation in the program has improved the students' classroom behavior, as well as their level of classroom participation. So this is the only one time we send that out in the spring, and that's a 1-year assessment, not a year-to-year comparison. Next slide, please. So those were the GEPRA measures for the federal reporting that would be reported in the APR every year. That is just a count of students when you report that to the APR. The state, however, has set performance goals based on these. The performance goals for this application were based on GEPR measures and statewide data collected during the previous program years. And there are indicators within each performance goal that are used to measure the progress towards those goals. The indicators are pre-established and in some cases include the instruments such as the teacher survey and a family survey that we talked about. Next slide, please. Oh, back one. Thank you. And again, you'll see these align very closely with the GEPR measures that we talked about. But the first one for the state performance goals is that all students will reach a high academic standard, demonstrating growth in reading, language, arts, and mathematics. That uses the exact same data as the GEPR measures. We're looking at that state assessment. You're not going to have to collect two things to measure the same outcome for students. Number two, all students will reach high academic standards demonstrating growth in all subjects. That is the same GPA data that we ask you to collect for the APR. 3% of students who are chronically absent from school will decrease. I think you might see a pattern here. Next slide. 4, all students will exhibit positive behavior changes that support academic and social growth. Students continually engaged in their learning. Number 6 is a new one that the APR does not require. We have a performance goal around family engagement, and family engagement being embedded in the entirety of the program. That is based on the feedback from the family survey that is also sent out in the spring. And then 7, early learners will reach high academic standards, demonstrating growth in reading. That is based on reading screeners for students in grades K through 2 that are entered into the system and assessed over the year. And next slide, thank you. And then the final component is local evaluation. This is a federal requirement. All sites are required to develop and measure progress towards site-specific goals. These site-specific goals are set by the program to be meaningful to the program. There is, you can use data from ELAP that is collected for all of the measures that we report for. You can use other data that is relevant to the goal. But each program is required to develop at least one performance measure with a quantifiable outcomes and provide activities and data collection related to that SMART goal for each of the state's 7 performance goals. So each site will develop 7 SMART goals for each local evaluation. If you have 1 site, you have 7 SMART goals. If you have 5 sites, you have 35 SMART goals. That's important to remember. But that is a federal requirement to participate in the 21st century programs. And that is all I had. I will turn it back over.
Thanks, Emily. And I think Mario's going to pick up.
Yep. All right. So keep in mind that these are competitive grants, but not just competitive grants, they're highly competitive grants that are awarded for 5 years. And that is provided that the project is achieving the desired outcomes for the students being served. This is a non-renewable grant. You'll have to reapply with the next application when your cycle is over after 5 years. For previous 21st century grant recipients who have completed a grant cycle may recompete for funding. Previous performance as an extended learning grantee will be taken into consideration in awarding of a new grant. Here is the per pupil allocation to pay attention to. It is $12.50 per student. When you're developing your budget, there's a minimum award amount of $50,000 per grantee and a maximum award amount of $500,000 per grantee. And all awards are based on the availability of funding. If awarded, the organization must serve at a minimum the expected number of students as indicated in the original grant application or subsequent revised and approved application documents. If you're not serving the expected number of students or making significant progress towards those performance goals, you may lose all or a portion of the funding that you're awarded. far as compliance monitoring, if you are awarded, you will be monitored on site and through desktop. On site monitoring, grantees are selected using risk assessment data. And at the conclusion of the visit, the grantee receives a copy of their completed monitoring tool along with corrective action plans if necessary. Desktop monitoring, we select 4 21st century grantees per month, and you provide all the supporting documentation needed for a reimbursement request or anything specifically asked. We may ask for a certain policy, anything, and you'll just upload it and we will review it at that point. If there's any unallowable costs found during the monitoring process, a corrective action letter will be issued along with a repayment letter for non-allowable expenses. Next slide, please. All right. Application and review process. All right. So you have to first complete the notice of an intent to apply by Monday, January 29th, 2024. E-plan user roles will be assigned utilizing the names and contact information provided in that form. In that form, there's 3 locations for 3 different names and email addresses. Make sure that you fill them all out so it can properly be submitted. All applications must be submitted through the department's e-plan grants management systems. Applicants that currently do not have access to e-plan must submit their information on the intent to apply form or must complete a user access form to obtain the access to the application. These are the responsible parties, your grant director, fiscal representative, and your authorized agency representative. Please pay close attention to who these people are, because when you submit your application, they will all have to approve or your application will not be submitted. So user access forms for community-based organizations can be found here in that link, and while the LEA user access forms can be accessed there in that link right there. New user access forms must be submitted by March 15th. That is March 15th again. The peer review process will not begin until each of these individuals has reviewed and approved the application. This happens a lot. There will be one person in the process that did not approve at the last minute. So make sure that all of these people approve your application so it can be actually submitted for review. Applicants are required to give public notice that the agency intends to apply for the 21st Century Grant and will be required to describe in the application how the public was notified. So if you posted in your social media or an advertisement in the paper or the agency's website, you'll have to document it there. The notification must include contact information for questions or comments. The review process. All complete applications meeting the program requirements and received by the department on or before April 1st by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time will be forwarded to the peer review committee. Like I said earlier, this grant is highly competitive, so applicants should ensure that all guidelines and requirements are met before submitting. The committee will provide each application with a technical merit score based on the review criteria and rubric. The technical merit scores will serve as the foundation for the grant award decisions, and a copy of the scoring rubric can be found in the Appendix A of the FY25 21st Century Request for Applications. And here's an overview of the timeline. January 29th, fill out your intent to apply. The application opens February 1st, 2024. We'll have weekly office hours in February. The applications are due in e-plan April 1st, 2023. The peer review process will take place in April and May of 2024. And a notification to all awarded and non-awarded applicants will go out in July of 2024.
Great, thank you, Mario. I am trying to get to questions in the chat. I'm having a little hard time keeping up with running the webinar and also the chat. So if we don't get to your question, shoot it to us in an email, and we'll make sure you get the information you need. Okay, so that was the program overview. Now we're going to shift and talk about each of the different sections of the application and talk about everything that is required. So there are 11 sections in the application that will need your attention, and you can see those listed up on the screen. And we are going to go over each of these in detail. And then, of course, all of this information and much more is going to be covered in that request for applications document. So the very first page that you'll see is the overview page. There is nothing for you to do or fill out on this page. It just contains a lot of good information. So up at the top, we have a link to the user access form for CBOs. And then we have a handy chart that goes over the workflow and the notifications for the grant. So this will be really helpful when you are looking up at the top of your sections page to see the status of your grant and kind of what the next steps are. And we'll talk a little bit more about this workflow in just a few minutes. Next on this page, we have links to helpful resources, including the RFA. There will also be a link to this PowerPoint on this page, as well as links to some documents about budgeting in the application, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And then at the bottom of the page, you have some contact information in case you get stuck. So again, nothing for you to do on this page, but definitely a page you want to check out before you get started. So next we have the cover page. On this page, you are just providing us with some basic information about your organization and your grant. So you will start by entering the name, official address, and website of your organization. Then you will list the extended learning project director's name, their email address, and their phone number. You will use a drop-down menu to select the organizational type that best describes your agency. So that would be whether you're a CBO, a faith-based organization, something else like that. Underneath, there will be a box for you to check to indicate if your application is a joint application between a district and a CBO. Then you will list your proposed sites. So for each site, you will provide the proposed number of students to be served, the grade span to be targeted, the site address, and then you will check the boxes to indicate if it is a Title I, CSI, TSI, and/or ATSI school. And then finally on this page, you will enter your organization's unique entity identifier, or UEI. You will not be able to submit the application without entering this information. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that information ready to go when you begin your application. So the next section of the application is the comprehensive needs assessment. And as we continue to go through these different sections, you will notice that several of the sections have points listed up at the top next to the title. On the slide, wherever you see points listed, this indicates that this is a section of the application that will be reviewed by the peer review committee. So this particular section will be worth 20 points. And I'm sure all of you know that conducting a needs assessment to really guide your program development and implementation is one of the essential tasks to planning to apply for this grant. And so you really want to make sure that you are doing a needs assessment to maximize the effectiveness and leverage your resources. You want to identify not only gaps, but also assets that you can use in your program. And then you also want to ensure coordination between all of your existing programs and the services that you are proposing in your application. So in this section, you will describe your community's needs and, again, your assets and what exists to support your project, as well as the process that you used in the development of your application. So specifically in these, this is exactly the wording that is used within the application. You will discuss how the community was notified of the intent to apply and how the application will be available for public input. the process used to identify community needs and assets, including the sources of data you used, as well as the key stakeholders who were involved. And we really want to see a varied group of folks when you're talking about those stakeholders. So not just your educators, not just your school leaders, but we also want to make sure you are involving parents, students when appropriate, and of course, those important community partners. You must describe the needs identified that will be addressed through your proposed activities, right? So everything that you are saying in this needs assessment should connect to your project design, right? You want those to be connected. You will describe your assets that you have identified, including the opportunities that you have to improve the program experience for students and families, and broadly how the assets can be used to support the program. And we use the word broadly there intentionally because you will have another section of the application where you will go into even more detail about those partnerships. You will identify how the proposed program will coordinate federal, state, and local programs. And this is actually a requirement of ESSA. So here, LEAs, for example, you want to think about your other federal programs, right? Your ESSA, your IDEA, your CTE. How will you coordinate grant funds with those programs? Think about your other state grants, that your state programs that you're operating as well. And then for CBOs, maybe you have a STEM grant from another organization, or maybe you also have a volunteer program that's built into your organization. How will you coordinate these already existing programs with your 21st century to maximize effectiveness? So next, we move on to the largest section of the application, and that is the project logistics and design section. And so it is worth 40 points in the overall grant review. This section holds the overall plan for implementing program activities. Again, these activities must address the needs and consider the assets that you identified in your needs assessment section, right? So again, we want to see that connection. You must provide a detailed description of how your goals will be achieved and an overall picture of what a typical day in the program would look like. So there are 7 areas that must be addressed within this section, and we will spend a couple minutes going over each of them. So the very first thing in what I'm calling the PLD section is you will address the organization's prior history implementing an extended learning program. So in this area, you must provide data and evidence of your previous success in operating out-of-school programs, targeting similar youth populations to be served by the proposed 21st century program. If your organization has not operated an out-of-school program in the past, you must provide evidence that otherwise demonstrates experience or the promise of success in providing such services. And there towards the bottom of the screen, you can see a screenshot of what that is going to look like. So you will see 2 boxes. The first one you would check if you are a prior grantee, and that is defined as an organization who has received either a 21st century or LEAP grant within the last 5 years. Okay, so if that applies to you, you would check that box, and then a series of questions specific to you would pop up and you would answer them. The next box you would check if you are a new applicant, and that is defined as an agency that has not received either a 21st century or a LEAP grant within the last 5 years. So if that applies to you, again, you would check that box and a series of questions would pop up. The next area would be around student recruitment and retention. And here we have a couple of prompts where we ask you to describe who will be served and the process you will use to recruit and retain students. You will also be asked to describe the data that you will use to determine student participation in the program. Okay, and so just like we discussed earlier, all of your students must meet those eligibility guidelines that we discussed, and they are also mentioned in detail in the absolute priority section of the RFA. Next, we have the nutritional programs and physical activity area. And so in this section, you will answer some prompts to describe how snacks will be provided and the type of physical activities that will be offered to students. It is very important to note that grant funds may not be spent on unhealthy snacks or foods during program hours or family engagement activities. And all grantees are required to include a minimum of 60 minutes per week of participation in structured physical activities and promote improved nutritional habits of program participants as part of the program design. And so in this section, that is where you will address all of those things. Grant reviewers will be looking for that minimum of 60 minutes per week. And we want to make sure that that is a structured physical activity. Okay, so free play out on the playground would not count. Again, we want to see, and those peer reviewers will be looking for structured activity in these areas. Okay, next we have our program schedule. And so these are simply tables that you will use to indicate the grade levels that you will be serving, as well as the number of hours that you will be open each week. So for each grade band, elementary, middle, and high, you will indicate when the programming will occur. So before school, after school, in the summer, or as part of an ELT program. You will also enter in the total number of program hours that it will be open each day of the week. And then you will also indicate the days that transportation will be provided if that applies to your program. So in addition to indicating the days that you will be providing transportation on those tables, there is also going to be a section in the in this section, excuse me, on this page that calls for a transportation plan. So in this area, you will describe the procedure for safe transportation of participants and include details as applicable about bus transportation, parent pickup, or walking. So however your students will be dropped off and picked up, you will want to make sure that you describe that thoroughly in this section of the application. And then, of course, all of your transportation is expected to be implemented in a manner that is consistent with those state child care guidelines. Okay, so again, really important resource for this application. You want to make sure you are looking over those guidelines as you're developing your application. Next, in the PLD area, we get to really kind of the meat of the plan, where you will discuss your plans around performance goals and indicators. And so this is another section that has tables to complete, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But within these tables, for each goal, you are going to describe specific program activities that will be implemented, again, to address each performance goal and target. Relevant professional development activities that you will provide as they relate to each goal, and then how progress towards each performance goal will be communicated with stakeholders. Again, we're looking at parents, students, educators, and community partners. Also in this section, you will be asked to describe the capacity of your organization to fulfill the GEPRA measures, state performance goals, and local evaluation requirements. And so what we're looking for here is for you to identify your internal staff members, not necessarily names, but maybe just roles, and a description of your organization's qualifications or relevant experience in this area. And so this is just a screenshot of what those tables look like. You will see instructions up at the top, and then you will see a table for each performance goal. So what we're looking at right now is just a screenshot of the table for performance goal 1. And then you will see those 3 narrative boxes. So there's the one for the activities that you are going to conduct to meet the performance goal. Second box is for the professional development that you will be providing regarding the role. And then that third box is how you will communicate results around this goal to your stakeholders. Okay, so you will complete this table for each of the performance goals. And so one of the questions that we always get, and Emily addressed this a little bit when she was talking, is what if we are not serving the grade band that is mentioned in those performance goal indicators? Okay, so for example, in performance goal 1, the indicators talk about students in grades 4 through 8 but I am running a high school site and I serve students in grades 9 through 12. So, what am I supposed to do for those sections? Well, rather than focusing your responses on the grade bands in the indicator, in this case, you would simply focus your responses on the grade bands that you will be serving, right? And so you see some examples up on the screen. So if you're not serving students in grades 4 through 8, for performance goal 1, you instead would describe the reading and math activities for the students you do serve, right? You would describe the professional development for your staff that support those activities. And then you would discuss how you would communicate results, again, for the grade band that you do serve. Okay, so points will not be deducted if your organization does not serve the grade band that is mentioned in those indicators. Again, you will simply respond to those prompts for the grade bands that you do serve. Okay, and now I'm going to hand it over to Mario, who's going to help us round out this section.
All righty. The next part of the section is your project timeline. In this section, this is where you describe the project timeline for the first year of the program, when activities will begin, certain project milestones, and the responsible parties. Your project milestones must be based on the proposed activities that will be implemented to achieve the performance goals. It is not necessary to identify all of the project activities. Here's a brief example of some of the things that you could put in your timeline. In July of 2024, your site directors are hired and trained. In August 2024, you go over different types of professional developments with your staff to get them ready for the upcoming school year. In September of 2024, your student benchmark data is collected, your IDs and email addresses and all those different things. You're just giving us a timeline showing the project milestones in that project timeline. Next slide, please. All right. The next section is your partnerships. It is worth 10 points. And this is where the applicant should describe how partnerships have or will be formed to carry out the objectives of the goals. This is where you should describe services offered by the partner, the frequency of such services. It's not like a one-stop thing. And the frequency of your partnership meetings where you're working with your partners to make sure that they know the objectives of the grant and what it is that you're trying to do with them to benefit the students. The next section is sustainability, worth 10 points. In this section, the applicants are asked to describe the process for continuing the project after grant funding is no longer available. The sustainability plan should be detailed and should include a list of in-kind contributions that include the source and approximate dollar amount, as well as details of any proposed program income or fees. But if you are wanting to charge any program income or fees, be sure that you have prior approval from the U.S. Department of Education and see the request for applications document for more information on that approval process. But a simple general statement about seeking other grant funds would be insufficient. So we want a detailed sustainability plan here. All right, and the next section is your budget, which is worth 20 points. The agency will upload a one-year budget for projected expenses from July 1, 2024 to June 30th of 2025 to the related document section of the application. There are two different ways to complete and upload the budget. Detailed budget instructions are included here in this link and in the FY25 21st Century Request for Applications document. And keep in mind that this is a reimbursement-based grant. Grantees are encouraged to maintain 2 to 3 calendar months of operating capital to provide programming between payment requests. We may be out monitoring or doing technical assistance, and it might take a little time to get you paid. So make sure you have the operating capital on hand. Grantees are expected to follow all guidelines for the administration of federal grants. Grantees should refer to the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, which we most all know as EDGAR, and uniform administrative requirements for cost principles, audit requirements, and federal award guidance. If you need any help, please review EDGAR. In your budget, there are two major components to the budget section of the application. Your budget line items. In your budget line items, this is where you will break out the cost, uh, and there's a table that shows you what the different line items are. So you'll know line 355 is for travel, line 524 is professional development. That's what line items are within your budget. And in your budget narrative, you need to be very, very detailed. This is where you describe why the expenditure is needed and how the dollar amount requested was calculated. Provide as much detail as possible. Don't just say $20,000 for teachers. Say, hey, we have 3 teachers at 4 different sites. They're paid this rate for this many hours a day, for this many days a week, for this many weeks a year. So we can clearly calculate and see if this is a reasonable cost and if the cost is accurate or not. The applicants must show the math. For example, the example like I just gave you, essentially. Multi-site applicants must clearly describe how staffing will be spread across the proposed sites. For example, if you're budgeting $100,000 to pay for teachers for 3 sites, show the breakdown on how each site will be staffed. And here's a few things to consider when preparing the project budget. The per student allocation, like we mentioned earlier, is $12.50 per student served. Your minimum award would be $50,000 and a maximum award of $500,000 annually per grantee. And making sure that you're supplement and not supplanting the grant funds. Funds received under this program may only be used to supplement and not supplant federal, state, and local funds that will otherwise be available and used for program expenditures. And here's a few other things to consider when preparing the project budget. Here's some allowable costs. Allowable costs, all expenses must be reasonable, necessary for the performance or administration of the project, applicable to particular cost objectives, legal and authorized or not prohibited under state or local laws, consistent with uniform policies of other federal and non-federal activities, consistent with generally accepted accounting principles, and adequately documented. And here's a few other things. Salaries and wages are allowable. In the budget narrative, distinguish which employees will be providing direct services to students and which staff members will be performing administrative tasks. Administrative costs must be reasonable and necessary and must not exceed 25% of the yearly award. Make sure that you pay close attention to this, that administrative costs must be reasonable and necessary and must not exceed that 20% of the yearly award. For full-time employees, the applicant must explain the process for determining what percentage of the employee's time will be spent on the grant. So we'd like to see a percentage breakdown. If you have someone who works on the grant 30% of the time, you'd be able to show what your pay is going to be. The applicant must clearly describe how all staff, including agency administrators, if applicable, support the achievement of the project goals. So if you have a staff member who's, I don't know, your chief of community outreach and they're working with your after school program, you need to clearly align how their job goes with working with after school students to benefit our students and the project goals. Professional development is allowable and you need to budget for it. Each application must budget to send a representative to our state trainings and meetings. We have regional check-ins, we have multi-state, we have a few different things that will be announced at the beginning of the year, so you can update your budget when needed. Applicants should also refer to the child care rules for specific requirements related to staffing. So you want to make sure that you're in ratio. If you have 800 kids in your after school program, you don't want to have 3 staff members. Make sure that your ratio is correct. Technology is allowed Under this grant, all technology items must be approved by the extended learning staff via a tech request, but you can budget in your application for up to 15 items per year with the max cost of $1,000 per item. So within your budget, if you want to go in there and budget for, I don't know, 15 iPads, you could do that. Just later on, we'd have to approve them. Typically approved, 15 items per year. Next slide, please. All right, indirect cost is also allowed under this grant. The department has been given the authority by the U.S. Department of Education to negotiate indirect cost proposals and to approve indirect cost rates for school districts. So school districts don't have to necessarily submit this in. We already know what their indirect cost rate is. Our community-based organizations, that's who will have to submit their their indirect cost rates. The department will allow state universities, state colleges, private colleges and universities, and non-governmental agencies to charge an indirect cost rate up to 8% or the agency's restricted rate approved by the appropriate cognizant agent. If awarded funding, the department will collect from the agency a copy of their current negotiated restricted indirect cost plan that has been approved by the appropriate cognizant agency. And generally for community-based organizations, the indirect cost rate is anywhere between 10% or less.
All right, I'm back. Thank you, Mario. So we're going to go back to equitable services and talk about what is going to be required in the application. We did, as many of you have probably noticed, beef up the equitable services portion for this competition. So if you are a previous grantee, you may notice some changes in this area. All applicants must take action on the equitable services page. So this applies to every organization that is completing an application, regardless of whether or not you have any non-public schools in your area. So up at the very top of the page, there will be an NA box that you can check if you are providing an assurance that there are no eligible non-public schools located within the area to be served by the subgrant. So if you check that box and make that assurance, then no further actions are required on the page, and you can move on to the rest of the application. If, however, you do have eligible non-public schools, then you will need to complete all of the fields on this page. So the very first thing that you'll see is a narrative box where you will describe the consultation process between your organization and your non-public schools. So within that response, you must include important dates, such as the dates that you contacted them. You must include the methods that you use to communicate. So was it through email? Was it phone, certified mail, an in-person meeting? And then you must describe the information that was provided to the non-public school representatives. So in addition to providing that in a written narrative, you will also upload those 21st century consultation forms to the related document section of the application. Next on this page, you will complete a table to list any non-public schools that were consulted with as part of this initial grant application. And then within that table, you will indicate whether the school said they would participate or not. If you have some non-public schools that want to participate, you will then provide a narrative to describe the process used to determine the equitable share of funds to make available for equitable services. And then, like I said, you want to make sure that you upload those consultation forms for each of those eligible schools in related documents. So because we really beefed up this section, we also added a lot of additional information to the request for applications document. So if any of this is confusing to you or you're not quite sure what you need to be doing for your non-public schools, please refer to that document. And then I am also available to talk through any questions that you might have around equitable services. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Okay, so we're getting down to the bottom sections of the application. And so we are to the sections that hold our competitive priorities. So the first one we've talked about a couple of times, and that is the priority to programs who propose to serve students who attend schools identified as CSI, TSI, or ATSI, and are jointly submitted between at least one LEA receiving funds under Title I and at least one public or private community organization. So in this section, you would simply check a box if you believe that you qualify for this priority, and then you would upload a letter of partnership to the related document section. And this competitive priority is worth 5 additional points. Competitive priority 2 is intended to expand the geographic distribution of programs. So 3 priority points will be awarded to applications that serve students in the counties you see up on the screen. So Benton, Chester, Dixon, Franklin, Houston, Meigs, Moore, Montgomery, Ray, and Weakley. And so these are all counties that have not had a 21st Century or LEAPS program within the last 5 years. So any agency applying for funds within these areas would receive 3 additional points. And then our final competitive priority is to ensure that all students have access to a quality education regardless of where they live. And so to that end, priority points will be awarded to programs that serve students in the following distressed counties: Bledsoe, Clay, Cobb, Hancock, Hardeman, Lake, Perry, and Scott. And so this list is actually based on the governor's current list of Tennessee's most distressed counties. So any organization within these areas would be awarded 3 additional points. This next section in the application is a very important one, and that is the related documents section. And this is where you will upload documents that are required as part of the application. So on this first slide, you are seeing a list of the uploads that are required of everyone. Okay, so all applicants must submit what you see up on the screen. So we have a statement of collaboration and partnership form. This is the form that you will complete with any of your community partners that you will be utilizing in your program. And we do have a copy of this available in the RFA. Next, we have proof of your unique entity identifier and your system for award management registration. So that would just be simply something you would print off and upload. We are asking for a copy of the most recent audit or financial review. If a financial audit or review has not been conducted in the last 2 years, then you must submit a current copy of the organization's operating budget. Next, we have our memorandum of agreement. And again, this is also available within the RFA. Our CBO applicants would want to make sure that they have an established MOA with the schools or the school districts that they are working with. And we are asking our school district applicants to make sure that they have MOAs established with the schools that they will be serving, as well as any other outside organizations who might be working with them to host a site. And then finally, you will make sure to upload your budget spreadsheet. Again, you will upload a budget to cover the first year of the grant. And let me say one more thing about that budget spreadsheet. Mario mentioned this. There are 2 different ways you could do that. You can either use a spreadsheet template, or you can actually complete the budget in ePlan, download it, delete it, and then upload it. And again, there are detailed instructions for both of those options within the RFA. So make sure you check that out if you're not familiar with how to do a budget for a competitive grant. Okay, so these are all the things that are required for all applicants to upload. And Artina is going to show you in just a little bit some instructions for how you'll do that when we go over all the ePlan instructions. So these are the documents that are required of only certain applicants. Okay, so we have our 501c3 determination letter and our IRS 990 form, and those are required for our CBO applicants only. Next, we have the consultation with non-public school forms, and that would be for any applicant that has an eligible non-public school. So that includes our CBOs and our school districts. We have the plan for offering expanded learning time, which you would only upload if that applies to you. And then finally, we have any requests for generating program income and or collecting program fees. And like Mario said, there is an appendix in the RFA devoted to program income and program fees, and the process that you need to follow to get approval for those. Okay, so top two are for CBOs only, and then the next ones are for everyone if they apply to your situation. And the final section of the application is the assurances. Should be pretty standard to any other grants you have. You want to make sure you read over these and fully understand them. Then you check the box to certify that the information is correct and that you understand those assurances. You enter the name of the applicant agency administrator, and then you will certify the date. So pretty simple on that page. Next, before we shift to our e-plan instructions, we're going to talk very quickly about charter schools. So if you are a district that has a charter school, you definitely want to make sure that they are aware of this opportunity. And if you do have any charter schools who would like to apply to host a program, then the application process will vary slightly for them. And so what we ask is that the district make sure that they provide any charter school applicants with the proper contact information of the person in the district who is responsible for this application and who will be submitting it in e-plan. We then ask that the charter school team complete all of the components of the application, including a budget, and save that to a PDF document. The charter school team would then submit that PDF to the district personnel, and then the district personnel would upload that PDF to the related document section of the application, and that could be uploaded to the partnership section of related documents. If the charter school is awarded funding, then the district would act as the fiscal agent and work with the charter school to prepare and submit a revised budget within the application in e-plan. So again, a little different than our typical process. So if you have any questions about how it would work with any of your charter schools, please let us know. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to Artina to go over e-plan instructions.
Good morning, everyone. As mentioned earlier, e-plan is our grants management system. So if you are new and this is your first time applying, you will use e-plan in every aspect of this grant. You will use e-plan to complete your application. You will use e-plan if you are awarded to do your budget, reports are due. You will use it extensively as a grantee. If you are go back one. If you are a district and you need to update your roles or review your roles or make sure that the approval is what you need to have happen for this grant application, you will find your form here. And if you are a community-based organization that already has access to e-plan, but you need to update roles, you can find your form here. All of this can be found on the homepage using that link above, and you do not need a login to access it. Next slide. Here are some general user tips, and there's nothing more frustrating than to start your application and start it in the wrong browser, and everything that you have uploaded and copied and pasted is gone. Please use Chrome. There are functions in e-plan that do not work with other browsers. So do not use Microsoft Edge. Chrome is preferred, and Firefox. So make sure that you're using the appropriate browsers when you are starting your application. There is not a back button in e-plan. So when you need to leave a section or go to a different section, use the Save and Go. And Save and Go can be found at the top of your page on your screen, and it can also be found at the bottom of your page on your screen. And use the funding, and then a separate window, pop-up window opens sections to navigate and move around to different links within the application. When you're working on the application, click on Help for Current Page to access e-plan, the application, and other helpful tips. This may help you as you're trying to navigate, especially if you're a first timer. And please save your work before you move to a different section, or you will have to go back and re-enter. And save often. It automatically times you out after 30 minutes. When you click on a different section link, it will begin the timer again. But should you need to do work that is on your desk and not necessarily computer centered, you'll look up and you will lose what you've entered and the clock will expire and automatically log you out. So make sure you click save often. Next slide. When you log into ePlan, that intent to apply form is very important. So for those of you who this is your first time using ePlan, this is your first time applying, or maybe you've applied in the past and you no longer have ePlan, when you submit that form, this is how I would generate your email and your user ID so that you can access ePlan and begin your application and get all of the items that you need to continue. So make sure that once you log in, you enter your email address and password. So you will get a notice from me saying, hey, you have access now. You'll also get an automated message that says, please set your password. And so once you do that, you are ready to enter. Next slide. When you log into ePlan, you will need to click on your organization. So if my organization is Kids Are Great, I'm going to see that in the middle of the page, and I'm going to click on Kids Are Great. Once I click on my organization name, to the left of your screen, you will see all of the boxes that are appropriate for you to complete your application. So you're going to click on Funding and Funding Application to begin. Make sure you change the year to 2025. And when you change the year to 2025, you should see this current cohort that is available to you. You will see all of, I'll go back. And you will click on that cohort to begin your funding application. Next slide. When you click on funding application and go inside 21st Century Cohort 2024, you will see all of the links that Brand mentioned previously that are needed for your application. So when you are ready to begin working on your application, you will need to, and you don't have to do things in order. So if you want to skip around, say you've already got your partnerships ready to enter and line up, you can go to that link first. If you already have a sustainability, you can put that in first. So make sure you just click on each link to add content to your application. But before you are able to do that, you will need to change the status to draft started at the top of the page. If you do not change the status to draft started, you will email and say, I'm trying to enter my information and it won't let me enter anything. It must be changed to draft started to begin and edit this application. And you will also need to refer to this same section when you are ready to advance your application. Next slide. So Mario and Brent mentioned about the budget and the two different ways that you can do your budget. So please, please, please. We've also mentioned that you need to familiarize, download, and read the RFA. So the RFA is very important, giving you instructions on how to enter your budget with whatever option you choose. But your budget can be found here. And the request for application will help you determine which way you want to put it in ePlan. Next slide. So you have got your budget on paper. You may have it on paper. You may have it in a Word document. You may have it in an Excel spreadsheet. And so if you choose this option to enter your budget, this is how you will go in to add lines and to begin to enter all of the things that you are trying to fund for this first grant year. If you do not see modify, it's because you either do not have the role needed to edit your budget or you have not clicked draft started. Either one of those items will prevent you from seeing the button that you need to make edits to your budget. Next slide. So you see the modify button, you clicked on it, And now you need to add budget detail to add items to the budget. Next slide. This is where you go in to decide what you're going to pay for. So are you going to pay for teachers? Are you going to pay for project director? Are you going to pay for transportation? Are you going to, this is where you will put in your line item for staff development. So this is where those items and the drop box that you list, that you select which one that you want to begin to enter into your budget. Next slide. Enter the quantity. So if I have 3 sites and I have 3 site directors, and I'm going to pay the site directors $10 an hour, you're going to list 3 times 10. So make sure you list the quantity that will help the reviewers understand the amount and what you're budgeting for. You're going to enter the cost. So I've got 3 site directors. I've got it at $10 each. The line item in ePlan will automatically calculate for you, so you don't need to do that. And you don't need to enter anything to the optional program code. And if you have not submitted your budget, you can come back and edit as long as you don't change the status and it remains in draft starting. Next slide. This is important. Mario mentioned this earlier. So when you enter your budget, we need to understand what you're asking for, what you plan on doing, and the math needs to make sense. This is your opportunity to enter a narrative and show the math. So I use the example, I've got 3 site directors. I'm going to pay them $10 an hour. Well, what does that mean? Is that $10 an hour for 180 days? Is that $10 an hour? Are they part-time? Is this for, do they have other roles? This will help the reviewers understand what you intend and how you intend to spend the money. So make sure that you have a narrative and make sure that you show your math, and please make sure that your math is accurate. So if I said I have 3 site directors at $10 an hour, but in my narrative, I've only listed 2 and I'm paying them $25 an hour, that's not going to score well on your application. So make sure both ends of the equal sign match. Your narrative math matches, and it matches the math of the numbers that you've actually put in your box. Next slide. This is where you can find all of the templates that you need. And this is if you choose where you will upload, if you choose that option for your budget, where you will upload your budget in Excel. So related documents, all the templates are there. You'll download them and you will list, there are no limits. So for partnerships and MOUs, you can upload as many forms as needed. And you will scan these items. Make sure that when you scan items that your files are good, they can be downloaded, they're legible, and that if appropriate, you have all the signatures that you need. And when you want to add additional items, you'll just click upload new under the document and link heading. Next slide. So I've uploaded something and I forgot a signature, or this is the wrong version, and I want to remove that and upload something else. So if you want to do that, you're going to select the button to browse for your document, and then you're going to upload it. And then once you've got that the document name in, you're going to create the link to upload the document. I recommend that you name items so that reviewers and you, when you need to go back, can easily figure out what is going on. So if you have MOUs for multiple sites, make sure that you name your items in a manner to where they're easily understood what they are. Next slide. This will be a part of it. You've already entered everything. You clicked on all of your links. You've got all of your stuff. You're pleased with what you've uploaded and what you've done and completed an ePlan. So now you're ready to submit. There are validation messages that will be at the end of the application. If you have an error, it will show that it's in red and it will not let you advance and change the status before you change the error. Usually those errors are related to budget, and they're related to you not checking the validations. So if you don't check the assurances, that portion, and you select both of those boxes, it will not let you advance your application. And if you want to know what the error is, it'll have an error message on the side, and you'll be able to click that link, and it will tell you exactly what's wrong. And then once you click on that link, you click on messages, and then you go in to correct the error. Next slide. So clear on your errors, and you are ready to submit. You double check everything, you're pleased with everything, you're ready to get the approval process started. So you're going to go back to the same place where you changed the status to draft started, and you're going to change the status to draft completed. After you click on draft completed, if you take your mouse and you hover over the link that shows draft completed, it will tell you who the next person is and the role needed for them to advance your application. So if you've submitted your application, and especially for people who may work in a large organization and you may have to make a couple phone calls or go down the hall, it will tell you who exactly that person is. And you can email or walk down the hall and say, hey, I've submitted my 21st century application and I need you to go in and approve it. And this is applicable for every role that is required for this grant application. Cannot stress enough, please familiarize yourself with the request for applications. Please, it's going to be in multiple pages, multiple sections of your grant application. When you first log in and you first see all of those links, it's right there in the overview. So please click on that link, download that document, read it before you begin your application and e-plan. And it'll also be a good guide for what you need to gather and the conversations that you need to have to get your ideas of what you want for your program started, so that when you go to enter an e-plan, everything flows well and it's not as frustrating. Next slide. This is the workflow, and this workflow is generally the same for all other items when you have things to complete an e-plan. Since this is a funding application, this is the workflow that must be done in order for your application to end up in the work list to be passed on to the reviewers. If any of these portions are skipped, you will not have your application advanced and it will not be scored. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to make sure that every step in this workflow is followed. So once you've done draft started, you've entered your application, you're ready to go, you've completed it. You're going to get your fiscal person to approve. And then once that fiscal person has approved, then you will get your agency for districts as your authorized representative for community-based organizations. It may be your founder, executive director, but you're going to get whoever that final approver is to approve in order to get the applications over to be reviewed by the reviewers. Next slide.
That's it for you, Artina. Thank you so much. A couple of questions in the chat that I want to address really quickly. What is the address to review the recording of this presentation once it ends? It's probably going to take us a couple days to get the recording posted. We have to go review it and get all the transcription. So it does take us a couple days. It will be posted in TDOE resources in ePlan. And then we will also probably email it out through bulk email in ePlan. So it definitely will be posted at the breadcrumbs that I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation in TDOE resources and ePlan. Let's see, what else did we have? Will the approvers receive an email that the draft has been completed? Yes, so ePlan will send an email out, an automatic notification as the application moves through the different stages. So that's why getting those correct email addresses is so important so that folks know what the next stop is. Does the cost per student include transportation? Yes, it is a flat $1,250 per student. Okay. That looks like all the questions for right now. Again, if we missed your question or didn't get to it, please shoot us an email. So your next steps, I'm going to wrap this up very quickly as we are at time. We've talked about this a couple times. Your very first step is going to be to submit your intent to apply. And again, we are asking that those get completed and submitted by January 29th. I did put a link to that form in the chat, and then we will be sure after this webinar, I will type up kind of an email that has a bunch of resources. We'll have a copy of these slides, and we'll put a placeholder to where the recording will be, and I'll make sure I put a link to that form in that email. So look for that either by the end of the day or first thing in the morning. So again, within that intent, we will ask you to go ahead and name your user roles. If you are in a very small organization and maybe you don't even have 3 people right now, you can go ahead and just list one person for each of those roles. We would prefer you to have 3 different folks, but we understand for this initial grant application that would be okay. If you are awarded, we would then need to go in and adjust those so that we do have the proper folks in place. If you have any questions about user access, just let us know. If you need to change whoever has access based on what you completed in the intent, then again, we are asking for those user access forms to be submitted by March 15th. That gives us time to process them and gives you all time to still complete the application by April 1st. When the application opens in ePlan, again, we are shooting for February 1st. It is looking good for February 1st, but if something happens, it may need to be shifted a couple days. We will send out an email to everyone letting them know, and it will also be posted on the homepage of ePlan. And by now, you are probably sick of hearing about it, but again, I cannot emphasize enough how important that request for applications document is. As soon as it is made available, we will be sure to send that out. Any questions that you have about the application can be sent to us at extended.learning@tn.gov. And then we will be hosting weekly office hours every Tuesday afternoon throughout the month of February to answer any questions you have. And that link takes you to a document which will give you all of the login information that you need for those office hours. Again, all applications must be submitted in ePlan by 11:59 p.m. Central on April the 1st. And again, we've said this several times, but remember that in order for that application to be officially submitted, it must be in the correct status of LEA authorized representative approved. Next, I have a handy list of what I consider to be the most important resources for this competition. All of these are in the RFA, and obviously up at the top, we have the RFA. Next, we have a link to that notice of intent to apply, which again, due January 29th. We have a link to the document that I just mentioned that provides information about our office hours. We have our standards for school administered childcare programs. We have a link to the document that will provide you with instructions on how to create and upload your budget within the application, and then a list of all of the non-public schools in Tennessee. With that, we are going to wrap up. Again, if you have questions, please email us, and we really look forward to seeing you all on our office hours, which will begin the first Tuesday of February. We thank you so much for your time and your interest in the 21st Century program. Again, if you have any questions or need assistance, please let us know. Thank you all again for joining, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.